Okay, and now I want you to talk about someone else I think is also very special. This woman is amazing. She is such a giver. She is an amazing copywriter. She's an amazing copy mentor, copy chief, copy mama, and all that, and a bag of potato chips and all. And she has a great Titanides group that she helps with mentoring, especially women in business, women copywriters. So please welcome my dear friend, Marcella Allison.
Thank you. Thank you, Carline, for having me here. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the chance to share my story. So who is Clayton to me? Well, every time I was at AWAI, Denise, the lovely Denise, talked about Clayton being at AWAI or one of Clayton's many copywriting workshops, Clayton would introduce me as his copywriting granddaughter, because my copywriting mentor was Parris Lampropoulos, who you heard from earlier. And Parris's copywriting mentor was Clayton. And I always wondered how Wendy felt about that, since we're about the same age, and suddenly Clayton's like, and Marcella's my granddaughter. So this is why when I first began to make a name for myself as a copywriter, I always give credit to Clayton for the amazing inheritance I received from Parris. And that includes the very simple lesson I'm going to share with you today. It is deceptively simple, but it has been one of the most powerful of my career. And I mean that. And Parris hinted at it, but he didn't quite go into it. So I'm glad, so he didn't steal my thunder. Now, not only have I relied on the secret to improve my own copywriting, but it is a secret that has helped me to earn my reputation as a great teacher and has allowed me to speak on stages and even teach my own copywriting courses. It's the thing that I have become known for. And that would not have happened if it had not been for Clayton and Parris. Now, this is how I remember the story. And since Parris has already spoken, he can't correct me. So Parris once told me that when he was first working with Clayton as an apprentice, before he became the brilliant mentor we all know and love today, that sometimes when he would turn his copy in, Clayton would simply rewrite it. You're shocked, I know. And this happened to me when I worked with Clayton on multiple projects for Wise Research. Clayton would simply rewrite my opening, or maybe he'd rework a whole section. Now, he wouldn't do it on the first shot out of the gate. He'd give me a couple of rounds of feedback, let me do my best to improve the copy. But eventually, when the copy needed to be turned in and it needed that one more level of genius, right? Clayton would sometimes just take it and rework a whole section. Now, if you are an apprentice or you're working with a great copy chief or a client who might also happen to be a great copywriter, I'm going to go out on a limb and guarantee that this is going to happen to you. And if you are a bad or a mediocre copywriter, then when this happens, you're going to get your panties all up in a twist. You're going to get all offended. You're going to complain that this copy chief destroyed your brilliant copy. But if you are an A-list copywriter and a brilliant student like Parris was, you don't do that. Instead, you see this as one of the greatest gifts of your career, because almost no one will show you how to take mediocre copy and turn it into A-level copy, line by line, sentence by sentence. And that is exactly what Clayton did when he rewrote my copy. Now, when Parris worked with Clayton, it was back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, as Brian Kurtz likes to joke, before Microsoft Word had all these fancy track changes features. So Parris would actually print out his original, print out Clayton's revised copy, put them side by side on the desk, and then literally go line by line and note the changes. Then he would ask himself the all-important question, why? Why did Clayton make that change? Now, sometimes the answer was obvious. In that case, Parris would simply note it in the margin. But if he didn't understand the reason why, then Parris would circle the change. He would go back to Clayton and ask. Then Clayton, being the great teacher that Clayton was, would explain the reason or the thinking behind the change, and Parris would make a note of it. So from the moment that Parris shared that story with me, I took that lesson to heart. And one day, when I was finally lucky enough to have Clayton review my copy, I used Microsoft Word, compare documents, to compare Clayton's version to mine. Then I made a note of all the most obvious reasons I could find, like, holy mackerel, that copy was so boring. I fell asleep and I wrote it. No wonder he rewrote it. But then sometimes I'd find a change and I couldn't figure out why he changed that. Like, why'd you delete that sentence, or why'd you move that to the back, right? I would circle those, I would go back and I would ask Clayton, and then I would write his answers down. And I would actually use the notes feature, right? And I would put in a note and highlight the change. Now, if I could share my screen right now, I would show you one of Clayton's before and afters. And Carline, my dear, you would be so happy because it would be covered in red in honor of Clayton. That copy would look like a murder scene. These, no, I'm not kidding. You know this, right? Like when you had the and the and, that's about how that went, right? So these before and after documents with all my notes about all the changes and the reason why have become my own personal copywriting Bible. Another one of my mentors, David Deutsch, once said, look, I don't mind when you make a mistake, but it's when you make the same one over and over again that it drives me crazy, right? So by creating track changes or a lesson learned document from all your projects, you stop making the same mistake, if only because eventually you get sick and tired of seeing it lit up in red every time. I want you to know, I want everyone on this call to know, I have, hand to God, every marked up version of every draft from every copy chief I have ever worked up on this little laptop, including Parris Lampropoulos, David Deutsch, Mark Ford, Mike Ward, and of course, my copywriting grandfather, Clayton Makepeace. Every before and after, every single one, everyone added to my education and became a stepping stone on my way to an A-list career. And when I finally became a copy chief myself, I began using this secret to train my mentees. And if you have ever seen me speak or train on copy on stage, then you know I always begin by showing you my crappy first draft, and then all the marked up versions, all the comments and changes from my copy chief, and then the final beautiful polished versions. And I explain all those lessons that I learned from the first version to the last, even if there's 17 versions in between. And in this way, Clayton's legacy to me becomes Clayton's legacy to the copywriters that I mentor. And the things that I wrote in the margin that I learned from Clayton become the lessons that I now get to share with the next generation of copywriters. So I guess I can call all of you Clayton's great grandchildren. So every time a client or a copy chief or even just a great reviewer, right, rewrites your copy, use the secret that I learned from Clayton and Parris. Sit down, study what they did, make a note of the lesson. If you don't understand, go back, ask the question, why did you change this? Build your own personal copywriting Bible. Do it in honor of Clayton. I promise you, it is worth its weight in gold. I want to thank Carline for letting me share my story, just a piece of it, and a huge hug to Wendy. And I have to close by saying, one of my favorite memories is listening to Clayton tell your love story over dinner. And I always said, there is nothing so attractive as a man who is so in love with his wife. And Clayton was surely in love with you.
Thank you so much, Marcella. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. My big takeaway from your session, which you wanted them to get, was why the change? You know, so it's as a writer, you love your copy. You see a copy chief come in, and it's pretty much like you said, a blood scene happening. Somebody said that's why it's called killer copy, because it's like, oh my goodness, they've destroyed your copy. But if you want to get better at your copywriting skill, go back and look and see why was the change made. Most of the time you'll see it. It's because your copy sucked and they made it better. But sometimes you won't see it. And so mark it up and go back and ask your copy chief, and go, why this change? I don't get what you're doing here. Explain to me. Not confrontational, but just with the purpose of trying to learn. what's going on. So that's a huge takeaway for writers, because you will get crits. And I love the other line you said about, the one more level of genius. You want your copy chief to bring you that one more level of genius. We're all on the same team. The client wants you to succeed. Your copy chief wants you to succeed. So don't look at it as an attack. My comments always, your copy sucks, you don't. So just remember that, and just take it, because the more you get for the crits, the more crits you get, the better you're going to be as a writer. So Marcella, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate those gems.
Thank you.
That you gave. Appreciate it.